The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the dusty depot in Park City, Utah, and Rose Turner pressed her gloved hands against her skirt, willing them to stop shaking as she prepared to meet the man who would become her husband within the hour. It was March of 1878, and the mountain mining town sprawled before her with its ramshackle buildings and mud-caked streets, so different from the genteel poverty she had left behind in Philadelphia. She had answered Austin Zimmerman's advertisement 3 months ago, exchanging carefully worded letters that spoke of practical matters like cooking skills and household management, never once touching on the bruises that had finally driven her to seek escape across half a continent. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand. Rose accepted, stepping down onto the wooden platform with as much grace as her exhausted body could muster. Her trunk followed with a heavy thud, containing everything she owned in the world, which was precious little. The afternoon sun hung low over the Wasatch Mountains, casting long shadows across the town, and Rose pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the crisp mountain air. "Miss Turner." A deep voice drew her attention, and Rose turned to see a tall man approaching from across the street. He was broad-shouldered and lean, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing a face that was handsome in a rugged, lived-in way, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. This was Austin Zimmerman, the rancher who had written those careful, courteous letters about needing a wife to help run his homestead. "Mr. Zimmerman." Rose dipped her head in acknowledgement, keeping her hands clasped firmly together. Her wrists ached beneath the fabric of her gloves, a constant reminder of the nightmare she had fled. "Please, call me Austin." His voice was gentler than she had expected, and when he smiled, it reached his eyes in a way that made something loosen slightly in her chest. "I hope your journey was not too difficult. It was long, but I am grateful to have arrived safely." Rose kept her responses measured, the way she had learned to do over the past 2 years. Do not say too much. Do not reveal too much. Do not give anyone reason to question or probe. Austin picked up her trunk with ease, muscles flexing beneath his shirt. "The preacher is waiting at the church if you are ready. But if you would like some time to rest first, to freshen up, I understand. There is a boarding house just down the street." The kindness in his offer made Rose's throat tighten unexpectedly. "I am ready now, if that suits you." They walked together through the dusty streets, Austin matching his long stride to her shorter one. He pointed out various buildings as they passed: the general store, the saloon, the assay office where miners brought their silver ore. Park City thrummed with activity even at this hour, men streaming out of the mines at the end of their shifts, their faces blackened with dust and exhaustion. The town had boomed when silver was discovered in the mountains, Austin explained, and though he ran cattle on land just outside of town, he did some hauling work for the mines to supplement his income during the winter months. The church was a simple white building with a modest steeple, and the preacher met them at the door with a smile that crinkled his elderly face. "Ah, Austin, you have brought your bride. Welcome, my dear, welcome to Park City." The ceremony was brief and practical, with the preacher's wife and the town doctor serving as witnesses. Rose spoke her vows in a steady voice, watching Austin's face as he promised to honor and cherish her. His blue eyes were serious, and she wondered what he saw when he looked at her, a woman of 22 with auburn hair and too pale skin. Dark circles under her green eyes from weeks of poor sleep and constant vigilance. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Austin did not immediately move to kiss her. Instead, he took her hand gently and squeezed it, a gesture of reassurance rather than possession. "Thank you," he said quietly, and Rose was not entirely sure what he was thanking her for. They signed the marriage certificate, and then they were walking back out into the fading daylight, legally bound to one another. Austin's wagon waited at the church, a sturdy vehicle pulled by two chestnut horses. He helped Rose up onto the bench seat before loading her trunk in the back, and then they were rolling out of town toward the ranch that would now be her home. The ride took nearly an hour, following a rutted road that climbed into the foothills. Austin pointed out landmarks along the way, a creek where the water ran cold and clear even in summer, a stand of aspens that turned gold in the fall, the distant peak where he sometimes hunted elk. He talked easily, filling the silence with stories about the land and the animals, never pressing Rose to respond beyond simple acknowledgments. When they finally crested a ridge and the ranch came into view, Rose caught her breath. The house was larger than she had expected, a solid log structure with a covered porch and glass windows that caught the last rays of sunlight. A barn stood nearby, along with several outbuildings and a corral where horses moved like shadows in the gathering dusk. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still capped with snow, and the valley spread out below like a secret place hidden from the rest of the world. "It is not much," Austin said, a note of uncertainty entering his voice for the first time. "But it is sound and sturdy. I built most of it myself over the past 5 years." "It is beautiful," Rose said, and meant it. After the cramped, dark room she had endured in Philadelphia, this open space felt like something from a dream. Austin pulled the wagon up to the house and jumped down, coming around to help Rose descend. His hands were warm and calloused as they circled her waist, lifting her easily to the ground. For a moment they stood close together, and Rose could smell leather and sage and something clean like mountain air. "I should show you inside," Austin said, stepping back. "You must be exhausted and hungry." The interior of the house was surprisingly tidy for a bachelor's home. The main room held a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and a sitting area with a worn but comfortable-looking sofa. Austin had clearly made an effort to prepare for her arrival. Wildflowers sat in a jar on the table, and the floors had been recently swept. He showed her the kitchen, well stocked with provisions, and then led her down a short hallway to the bedroom. "I will sleep in the loft," Austin said quickly, gesturing to a ladder that led to an open space above the main room. "You should have privacy and comfort. I know this is all very sudden, and I do not want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable." Rose stared at him, trying to reconcile this consideration with everything she had learned to expect from men. "You do not have to. I want you to feel safe here," Austin interrupted gently. "We barely know each other, Rose. I hope that will change with time, but I am not going to demand anything from you. This is your home now, and you should feel at peace in it." The tightness in Rose's chest returned, sharper this time, and she had to look away before he could see the moisture gathering in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Austin showed her where everything was kept, how to work the stove, where the well was located for drawing water. He was patient and thorough, never talking down to her but treating her as an equal partner in managing the household. When he finally left her alone to settle in, promising to return in an hour with dinner, Rose sank down onto the edge of the bed and let herself exhale fully for the first time in months. That night, they ate a simple meal of beans and cornbread that Austin prepared himself, chatting about practical matters like the garden plot he had already fenced in for her use, and the chickens that would need tending each morning. Rose found herself relaxing slightly in his presence, the way he never rushed her responses or seemed impatient with her quietness. After dinner, he showed her how to bank the fire properly for the night, then excused himself to the loft with a book and a lantern. Rose changed into her nightgown and slipped between the clean sheets, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. An owl called from somewhere in the darkness. The wind sighed through the pine trees. And above her, she could hear the faint rustle of pages turning as Austin read. She fell asleep more easily than she had in years. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Rose woke early and prepared breakfast while Austin tended the livestock. They ate together, discussing the work that needed doing, and then Austin would head out to check fences or move cattle or cut firewood while Rose managed the household tasks. She threw herself into cooking and cleaning and organizing, grateful for work that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. Austin was unfailingly courteous and respectful, never entering a room without announcing himself, never touching her beyond the most casual and necessary contact. He praised her cooking and thanked her for her work, and in the evenings, they sat together by the fire while he taught her about the ranch and the land, about reading weather signs and animal tracks. Rose found herself watching him when he was not looking, noticing the strength in his hands, the gentleness with which he handled frightened animals, the way his face softened when he smiled. 2 weeks after her arrival, Rose was hanging laundry on the line when one of the clothespins slipped from her grasp. She reached up quickly to catch it, and her sleeve pulled back, exposing several inches of her wrist. She did not notice immediately, focused on securing the sheet, but when she finally looked down, her heart stopped. The rope burns were clearly visible, angry red marks that circled her wrist like a brand. Some had begun to heal, turning purple and yellow at the edges, but others were fresher, scabbed and raw. She had been so careful to keep them covered, wearing long sleeves even in the warmth of the afternoon, but now they were exposed to the bright mountain sunlight. Rose. Austin's voice came from behind her, tight with something she could not identify. She spun around, instinctively pulling her sleeve down, but it was too late. He had seen. His face had gone pale beneath his tan, and his eyes were fixed on her wrist with an expression that made her stomach clench with fear. "I should finish the laundry," Rose said quickly, turning back to the basket. "Rose, wait." Austin moved closer but stopped several feet away, as if sensing that proximity would make her bolt. "Those marks on your wrist, how long has this been?" Rose kept her back to him, her hands shaking as she gripped another sheet. "It is nothing. An accident." "That is not an accident." Austin's voice was rough now, anger bleeding through despite his obvious effort to control it. "Those are rope burns. Someone tied you up. Someone hurt you." Rose squeezed her eyes shut. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped for more time, more distance from the memories that still haunted her sleep. "Please, I do not want to talk about it." "I need to know," Austin said, and there was something almost desperate in his tone. "I need to know what happened to you. How long has this been going on?" The gentleness beneath his anger was what broke her. Rose's shoulders sagged, and she set down the wet sheet with trembling hands. 2 years, she whispered. "It went on for 2 years." She heard Austin draw in a sharp breath. "Who did this to you, my stepbrother?" The words came out flat, emotionless, the only way she could say them without falling apart. "After my mother died, I had nowhere else to go. He said I could stay if I earned my keep. He worked at the docks and he drank, and when he drank, he got mean. At first, it was just yelling and pushing. But then it got worse. He started tying me up when he left for work, said he did not trust me not to run away or steal from him. Sometimes he would forget to come home until the next morning, and I would be there all night, unable to move or get water, or her voice broke, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting for control. Austin made a low sound of rage and anguish. "Rose, I am so sorry." I am so damned sorry that happened to you. I saved every penny I could hide, Rose continued, needing to finish now that she had started. It took months, but I finally had enough for the train ticket. I left in the middle of the night when he passed out drunk. I was so afraid he would come after me, that he would find me at the station or on the train. But he never came. Or if he did, I was already gone. She finally turned to face Austin, and what she saw in his expression made her breath catch. His face was stricken, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. He looked at her as if she were something precious and broken, as if her pain physically hurt him. "You are safe now," he said hoarsely. "I swear to you, Rose, you are safe here. No one will ever hurt you like that again, not while I am alive." Rose felt something crack open inside her chest, a wall she had built so carefully to survive beginning to crumble. "I was so afraid to tell you. I thought you might send me back, or that you would think I was damaged, or no." Austin moved closer slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. When she did not, he reached out and took her hands in his, careful not to touch her wrists. "You are not damaged. You are strong and brave and so much tougher than anyone should have to be. What was done to you was cruel and wrong, and none of it was your fault. Do you understand me? None of it." A sob escaped her throat before she could stop it, and then Austin was pulling her into his arms, and Rose was crying against his chest, great wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. He held her tightly, one hand cradling her head, murmuring soothing words into her hair. She cried for the girl she had been before her mother died, for the innocence she had lost, for the nights spent tied and terrified and alone. She cried until she was exhausted, until there were no tears left, and through it all, Austin held her. When she finally quieted, he did not immediately release her. Instead, he pulled back just enough to look into her face, using his thumbs to wipe away the wetness on her cheeks. "I want you to listen to me," he said seriously. "I know I am still mostly a stranger to you, and I know you have no reason to trust men after what you have been through. But I need you to know that I will never, ever hurt you. I will never lay a hand on you in anger. I will never tie you or trap you or make you feel like you do not have choices." Rose searched his face, seeing only sincerity and a fierce protectiveness that made her heart ache. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. "Why did you want a mail-order bride?" Austin was quiet for a moment, his hand still cupping her face. "I was lonely," he admitted. "This is beautiful country, but it is isolating. I wanted someone to share it with, someone to build a life with. I want children someday, a family. But more than that, I wanted a partner, someone who could be my equal, my companion." I know that probably sounds foolish, asking for so much from a stranger through letters. "It does not sound foolish," Rose said softly. "It sounds like what I wanted too, what I was hoping for when I answered your advertisement." "Then let us try to build that," Austin said. "Let us take our time and get to know each other properly. There is no rush, Rose. We have all the time in the world." He released her then, stepping back to give her space, and Rose felt the loss of his warmth like a physical thing. But she also felt something else, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have the life she had been afraid to even dream about. Over the following weeks, their relationship shifted and deepened. Austin was endlessly patient, never pushing her beyond what she was comfortable with, but also making it clear that he cared for her. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows. He fixed the rocking chair on the porch so she could sit and watch the sunset. He taught her to ride, choosing the gentlest mare in his string and staying close beside her as she learned to manage the reins. Rose began to heal, not just physically as her wrists faded to faint scars, but emotionally. She laughed more easily. She slept without nightmares. She started to initiate conversations and share her own thoughts and opinions, discovering that Austin valued what she had to say. They talked about everything: his childhood on a farm in Nebraska, her memories of better times before her mother's illness, their dreams for the ranch, their favorite books and songs and foods. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Austin reached over and took Rose's hand. It was not the first time they had held hands, but this felt different somehow, weighted with meaning. "I have been thinking," he said quietly, "about what I said on our wedding day, about sleeping in the loft and giving you space." Rose's heart began to beat faster. "What about it?" "I meant what I said about not pressuring you, but I also want you to know that my feelings have changed." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense in the starlight. "I am falling in love with you, Rose. Maybe I have been falling since the day you stepped off that stagecoach looking so scared and so determined at the same time. And if you do not feel the same way, that is all right. I will not be angry or hurt, but I needed you to know." Rose felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from the ones she had cried before. These were tears of joy and relief and a happiness so intense it was almost painful. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have been afraid to admit it, even to myself. But I do, Austin. I love you." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and brushed his lips against hers in the gentlest kiss imaginable. It was sweet and tender and full of promise, and when they broke apart, Rose was smiling. "Will you come down from the loft?" she asked shyly. "Will you share the bedroom with me? Are you certain?" Austin's voice was rough with emotion and desire, but also with the same care he had shown her from the beginning. "I am certain," Rose said firmly. "I trust you, Austin. I want to be your wife in every way." That night they came together with a tenderness that made Rose weep. Austin was patient and careful, constantly checking that she was comfortable, that he was not hurting her. He kissed every scar on her wrists, his lips gentle on the faded rope burns, whispering promises against her skin. When they finally joined, Rose felt a completeness she had not known was possible, a sense of coming home to a place she belonged. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Austin held her close and stroked her hair. "Thank you," he murmured. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for giving me the gift of your heart." Rose pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his steadily beating heart. "Thank you for seeing me as more than my scars. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for loving me." They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other, and Rose slept more peacefully than she ever had in her life. The summer unfolded in a haze of happiness. Rose and Austin worked side by side, building their life together. They expanded the garden, planted an orchard of young fruit trees, added more chickens and a milk cow. Austin taught Rose to fish in the creek and to track deer through the forest. Rose taught Austin to make proper bread and to mend clothes with neat, even stitches. They made love frequently, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and joy. Austin was always attentive and generous, and Rose found herself blossoming under his touch, the last remnants of fear and shame falling away. She grew more confident, more comfortable in her own skin, more certain of her place in the world. In August, the town held a dance to celebrate the end of harvest season, and Austin insisted they attend. Rose was nervous about meeting the townspeople properly, worried that somehow her past would be visible on her face. But Austin held her hand firmly as they entered the community hall, introducing her proudly to everyone they met. The women of Park City welcomed Rose warmly, several of them admitting in lowered voices that they too had come west to escape difficult situations. The frontier was full of people seeking second chances, fresh starts, and no one seemed inclined to ask too many questions about what had come before. Rose found herself relaxing, even laughing, as she danced with Austin and chatted with her new neighbors. "You look happy," Austin said during a slow waltz, his arms secure around her. "I am happy," Rose replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." "Good." He kissed her temple. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." As autumn painted the mountains gold and red, Rose realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. At first, she did not want to hope, afraid of disappointment. But when the third month passed, and she began to feel queasy in the mornings, she could no longer deny the truth. She told Austin one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, he simply stared at her, and then a smile broke across his face so bright and joyful that Rose felt her own eyes fill with tears. "A baby," he said, his voice cracking. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Rose laughed, and then Austin was lifting her and spinning her around, whooping with delight. He set her down carefully, immediately looking concerned. "I am sorry, I should not have done that. Are you all right? Should you be resting? What do you need?" Rose cupped his face in her hands and kissed him thoroughly. "I am pregnant, not made of glass, but yes, I am all right. I am more than all right." Austin dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her still flat belly, his expression one of wonder. "Hello in there," he whispered. "I am your father, and I already love you more than I knew was possible." Rose ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. The winter was harsh that year, with snow piling high around the ranch and temperatures dropping well below freezing. But the house was warm and snug, and Rose and Austin spent the long evenings planning for the baby's arrival. Austin built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, carving delicate designs into the headboard. Rose sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands steady and sure. When her belly began to swell visibly, Austin became even more protective and attentive, insisting she rest frequently and not lift anything heavy. Rose found his concern endearing, even when it bordered on excessive. She had never been cared for like this. Never had someone worry about her comfort and well-being with such genuine devotion. In February, during a brief warming spell that melted some of the snow, Austin drove Rose into town to meet with the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Harrison, who had delivered half the babies in Park City. She examined Rose and pronounced everything progressing well, estimating the baby would arrive in late April or early May. "Your husband clearly adores you," Mrs. Harrison said with a smile as they prepared to leave. "I have delivered many babies over the years, and I can always tell which marriages are built on love. You two have something special." Rose squeezed Austin's hand. "We do," she agreed. The baby came on a warm evening in late April, just as the aspens were beginning to leaf out. Rose's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Austin looked terrified, hovering at her bedside and gripping her hand so tightly she thought her bones might break. But Mrs. Harrison remained calm and encouraging, coaching Rose through each contraction until finally, just before midnight, a lusty cry filled the room. "A boy," Mrs. Harrison announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Rose's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Rose stared down at her son in awe, counting his tiny fingers and toes, marveling at his perfect little nose and the dark fuzz covering his head. Austin was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as he touched the baby's hand and watched their son's fingers instinctively curl around his own. "He is perfect," Austin whispered. "Rose, he is absolutely perfect." They named him James Austin Zimmerman, and he became the center of their world. Austin was a devoted father, walking the floor with James when he fussed, changing his diapers without complaint, singing him lullabies in his deep, slightly off-key voice. Rose nursed their son and watched Austin with him and felt her heart expand to encompass this new, overwhelming love. The years that followed were full and rich. James grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. The ranch prospered, their herd growing, their land becoming more productive. Rose gained a reputation in Park City for her excellent baking, and she began selling pies and bread to the hotel, bringing in additional income. When James was 3, Rose gave birth to a daughter they named Clara Rose Zimmerman. She was a placid baby with dark curls and an easy smile, and James was fascinated by his little sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help care for her. Austin built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family, adding 2 bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Rose would look at her life and feel amazed that it was real. She had a husband who loved her deeply and treated her as an equal partner. She had 2 beautiful, healthy children. She had a home that was truly hers, where she felt safe and valued and free. The scars on her wrists had faded to thin, white lines, barely visible unless you knew to look for them, and even the memories of that dark time had lost their sharp edges. One evening, when James was 5 and Clara was 2, Rose was putting the children to bed when James asked, "Mama, were you always happy?" Rose smoothed his hair back from his forehead, considering her answer carefully. "No, sweetheart. There was a time when I was very sad and scared. But then I came here and met your father, and he helped me find happiness again." "How did he do that?" James asked, his young face serious. "He was kind to me," Rose said simply. "He was patient and gentle, and he made me feel safe. And he taught me that love is not about hurting people or controlling them. Love is about caring for each other and building a life together." "Like you and Papa," James said with satisfaction. "Yes," Rose smiled. "Exactly like your Papa and me." She kissed both children good night and went to find Austin, who was sitting on the porch watching the stars. She settled beside him, and he automatically wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I was thinking about the day you arrived," Austin said quietly. "How nervous I was, how afraid that we would not suit each other. I could not have imagined then how much you would come to mean to me." "I was terrified," Rose admitted. "I had no idea if I was running towards something better or just trading one prison for another. But you showed me what it means to truly be loved." Austin turned to face her, his expression serious. "Do you ever think about him? Your stepbrother?" Rose considered the question. In the early years, she had sometimes worried that he would find her, that he would show up and try to take her back. But as time passed and their life in Park City became more established, that fear had gradually faded. "Not often anymore," she said honestly. "And when I do, it does not have the same power over me. He took 2 years of my life, but I have had almost 8 years of happiness since then. He does not get to define who I am." "You are the strongest person I have ever known," Austin said, cupping her face in his hands. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for staying." "Thank you for asking how long it had been," Rose whispered. "Thank you for caring enough to ask, for insisting on knowing even when I tried to hide it. You saved me, Austin." "No," he said firmly. "You saved yourself. You found the courage to leave, to take that train across the country into an unknown future. I was just lucky enough to be here when you arrived." They kissed then, long and deep, tasting of love and commitment and shared history. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the ranch sprawled out in the darkness, solid and real and theirs. Above, the stars wheeled in their eternal patterns, and the mountains stood sentinel. Rose had traveled a long, hard road to reach this place, this moment. She bore the scars of her journey, both visible and invisible. But she also carried the strength she had gained, the knowledge that she had survived the worst and come out the other side into the light. 2 more children eventually joined their family, twin boys born when Clara was 4. Thomas and William were identical and mischievous, keeping Rose and Austin constantly on their toes. The house expanded again, growing to accommodate their brood, and the sounds of children's laughter became a permanent soundtrack to their lives. Austin proved to be as devoted to their sons and daughters as he was to Rose, teaching them to ride and rope, to respect the land and animals, to treat all people with kindness and dignity. He made sure Clara received the same ranch education as her brothers, insisting that capability was not determined by gender. Rose taught all of them to read and write, doing lessons at the kitchen table each morning before they scattered to their chores. On their 10th anniversary, Austin surprised Rose with a trip to Salt Lake City. They left the children with Mrs. Harrison, who had become a close friend over the years, and spent 3 days exploring the growing city. Austin bought Rose a new dress and took her to a restaurant where they ate steak and drank wine and talked late into the night like they had when they were first falling in love. "You ever regret it?" Rose asked as they walked back to their hotel, hand in hand. "Taking a chance on a mail-order bride, you could have courted someone local, someone you knew." Austin stopped walking and pulled her into his arms right there on the sidewalk. "Not for a single moment," he said emphatically. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rose Zimmerman. You and our children, this life we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed of having." Rose kissed him, not caring who might be watching. "I love you," she said simply. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." They returned to the ranch refreshed and even more connected than before. Life continued in its rhythms, seasons changing, children growing. James eventually took over more and more of the ranch work, proving to have his father's skill with animals and land management. Clara became an accomplished rider and showed a talent for training horses. The twins were inseparable, always scheming up new adventures that usually resulted in muddy clothes and scraped knees. When Rose was 41 and Austin was 43, they became grandparents. James had married a schoolteacher from Salt Lake City, and they had a daughter they named Rose, in honor of the grandmother who doted on her shamelessly. Austin built them a house on the far edge of the ranch property, keeping the family close while giving the young couple their own space. One summer evening, Rose and Austin sat on their porch as they had countless times before, watching the grandchildren play in the yard while their parents supervised. Rose's hair was now streaked with silver, and Austin's face bore deeper lines, but their love had only strengthened with time. "I was thinking today about those rope burns," Austin said quietly. "About the day I saw them and you told me what had happened." Rose looked down at her wrists, where the scars were now so faded they were barely visible, just thin white lines that only showed in certain light. "What about them?" "I was thinking about how afraid you were that day, how you tried to hide them from me, and I was thinking about how far we have come since then." He took her hand, running his thumb gently over the faint scars. "These marks were a sign of someone trying to break you, trying to take away your freedom and your spirit. But instead, you broke free. You found your strength and you escaped and you built this incredible life." "We built it," Rose corrected. "Together." "Together," Austin agreed. "I am so grateful that you answered my advertisement, Rose. I am grateful for every day I have had with you." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their grandchildren laugh and run. James's little Rose was chasing the twins, who were pretending to be horses. Clara was helping her sister-in-law set out a picnic supper. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "When I was tied up in that dark room in Philadelphia," Rose said slowly, "I used to imagine what freedom would feel like. I would dream about having choices, about going where I wanted, doing what I wanted, being with people who valued me. But even in my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined something as beautiful as this life we have." Austin kissed her temple, a gesture of affection that had become habitual over the years. "You deserved every bit of it. You deserved to be free and loved and happy." "So did you," Rose said, turning to kiss him properly. "Thank you for being the kind of man who asked, who cared enough to notice my scars and insist on knowing the truth. Thank you for not letting me hide." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, their family gathered on the porch for supper. There was laughter and teasing, stories shared and plans made. Rose looked around at all these people she loved, this family she and Austin had created together, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful in its intensity. She had been broken once, bound and trapped and desperate. But she had survived. She had escaped. And she had found not just safety, but love, real, deep, enduring love that had given her everything she had dreamed of and more. The rope burns on her wrists had healed long ago, but even if they had not, even if the scars had remained angry and visible, it would not have mattered. They were part of her story, part of the journey that had led her to this place, this man, this life. And what a life it was! Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. They lost Austin's mother, who they had finally convinced to move to Utah in her later years. They celebrated more weddings as Clara, and eventually the twins found partners and married. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. The original log house became a gathering place for the entire extended family, with additions sprawling in multiple directions to accommodate everyone during holidays. When Rose was 53, she fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For several terrifying days, Austin feared he would lose her, sitting at her bedside day and night, holding her hand and praying. But Rose's strength, forged in the fires of her difficult past, pulled her through. When she finally opened her eyes and smiled weakly at him, Austin wept with relief. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," Rose whispered hoarsely. "We still have too many years left together." And they did. They lived to see their grandchildren begin having children of their own. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 40th. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, providing not just for their immediate family, but for their children and grandchildren. Austin and Rose became respected elders in Park City, known for their fairness, their generosity, and the obvious love that still existed between them even after decades of marriage. On a warm spring day, just after their 45th anniversary, Austin and Rose took a rare afternoon away from the bustle of family to ride up into the mountains alone. They packed a picnic and took their time, following old familiar trails to a meadow they had always loved, full of wildflowers and overlooking the valley below. They spread a blanket and ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Austin was 70 now, his hair completely white, his movements slower but still strong. Rose was 68, her face lined but still beautiful, her eyes still the same green that had captivated him the day she stepped off that stagecoach. "You remember the day we met?" Austin asked, lying back on the blanket and pulling Rose down beside him. "Of course," Rose said, nestling into his shoulder. "I was so scared. I thought I was hiding it well, but I was terrified." "I knew you were afraid," Austin admitted, "but I also saw your strength." Even then, Even before I knew your story, I could see that you were someone special, someone brave. I saw kindness in you, Rose said, and gentleness. Even though I had learned not to trust those qualities in men, I saw them in you and I wanted so badly for them to be real. They were real, Austin said. They are real. Everything I promised you that first day I have tried to live up to every day since. You have, Rose said firmly. You have been everything I could have hoped for and so much more. They lay together in the meadow as the sun moved across the sky, holding hands and remembering. They had built something rare and precious together, a love that had weathered storms and grown stronger with time. They had created a family, a legacy, a life worth living. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Austin turned to Rose and kissed her softly. "I love you," he said, "now and always." "Now and always," Rose echoed, kissing him back. They rode back to the ranch as twilight fell, arriving to find their children and grandchildren gathered for Sunday supper, as had become tradition. The house was full of light and warmth, and the sound of multiple generations sharing a meal together. Rose and Austin took their places at the head of the table, surrounded by the family they had created, and bowed their heads as James said the blessing. After dinner, as Rose helped clean up in the kitchen surrounded by her daughters and daughters-in-law, Clara said suddenly, "Mama, will you tell us the story of how you and Papa met?" Rose looked around at all these beloved faces, these women who had married into the family and become her daughters in every way that mattered. "You have heard it before," she said gently, "but the grandchildren have not," Clara pressed. "And I think it is important for them to know, to understand what real love looks like." So Rose dried her hands and gathered everyone into the main room, where Austin was already surrounded by children and grandchildren, all clamoring for his attention. She caught his eye and he smiled, understanding passing between them. "Your grandfather and I met when I came to Utah as a mail-order bride," Rose began, and the room quieted as everyone settled in to listen. "I was running from a difficult past, and he was looking for a partner to share his life with. We married the day I arrived, two strangers bound together by legal papers and hope." She told them about those early days, about Austin's patience and kindness, about learning to trust again. She told them about the day he saw her scars and asked the question that changed everything. She did not give them all the painful details, those were hers and Austin's alone, but she gave them enough to understand the journey. "What I want you all to understand," Rose said, looking at each face in turn, "is that love is not just about the easy moments. It is about seeing someone at their most vulnerable, their most broken, and choosing to stand beside them anyway. It is about patience and gentleness and commitment, even when things are hard. Your grandfather taught me what real love looks like, and together we built this family, this life." Austin reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. "And you taught me," he said to Rose, "that strength comes in many forms, that surviving difficult circumstances does not make you weak, it makes you incredibly strong. Every day with you has been a gift." Rose Zimmerman, their youngest grandson, only 5 years old, piped up, "Did you really get married the same day you met?" "We did," Austin confirmed. "That is fast," the boy said seriously, and everyone laughed. "It was fast," Rose agreed. "But sometimes when you know, you know." And even though we barely knew each other that day, we made a commitment to try, to build something together. And we did. As the evening wore on and family members gradually departed for their own homes, Rose and Austin finally found themselves alone again. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom. They had moved to a first-floor room in recent years, finding the stairs difficult, and prepared for bed in comfortable silence. "Thank you," Rose said as she brushed out her long silver hair, "for all of it. for every day, every year, every moment. Thank you for seeing me, for asking about my scars, for caring enough to not let me hide. Austin came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, meeting her eyes in the mirror. Thank you for having the courage to answer my advertisement. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. They stood there for a long moment, looking at their reflections, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true from the most uncertain of beginnings. When they finally climbed into bed, Austin pulled Rose close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees. The moon rose over the mountains. And in the house they had built together, surrounded by the echoes of the family they had created, Rose Turner Zimmerman closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that she was exactly where she belonged, wrapped in the arms of a man who had loved her through everything, whose simple question on a spring day so many years ago, "How long has this been?" had opened the door to a love that would last a lifetime.